I hate telling this story, not only because of how traumatic it was for me, but because it does show my age. My therapist tells me I should learn to look for the positives in things, so the only way I really know how is by making light humor. This was the early 90s, and I was about 16 going on 17, working as a regular babysitter in our neighborhood. My parents had decided that the only way I was going to actually get a car would be if I was the one that saved up for the down payment. So every afternoon after school, I would tutor kids or watch babies, whatever I could do to earn a few extra bucks. There was one couple, the Moores, that always paid exceptionally well, and on Valentines, they had a special request for me to watch both their 6-year-old and their 10-year-old, so they could go enjoy a romantic evening together. "We will be back by 8, they said, and gave me about $50 just for ordering pizza, renting movies, whatever the kids wanted to do. I asked them both what they wanted, and they both chimed in with the request to go to the local video rental store. I knew that the Blockbuster wasn't very far, but I insisted that I didn't want to do that until I got confirmation from their mom. This being the age before cell phones, that required I had to look up the phone number in an actual phone book and call the restaurant where they were dining. Those two boys were so eager to hear a yes from their mom, I thought they might explode from excitement. It took about 15 minutes for me to finally get in touch with their mom, who seemed a little frazzled that the only reason I was calling was so we could go to Blockbuster. "Yeah, that's fine. Just don't spend all their money, and nothing R-rated," she responded. When I told them, both of the boys squealed and ran to get their jackets. We left the house before it got dark, and made it to the rental store in less than 10 minutes. Not surprisingly, it was pretty empty, save for the cashier and maybe one or two customers. "Go pick out whatever you want," I told them as I grabbed some candy bars and popcorn. The oldest came back first with a VHS of some Disney sequel and asked if this was okay. I told him yes, and then asked where his brother was, only for him to be surprised that I didn't know. Both of us went down the aisles looking for him, and for a split second, I got scared thinking he had decided to play some terrible prank and run off. Finally, though, I saw him standing near the edge of an aisle, talking to a tall, lanky man wearing a trench coat. As soon as I saw this guy, I got a weird vibe and grabbed the younger boy's hand. "Sorry, I hope he wasn't bothering you," I nervously told the stranger. He smelled funny, as if he hadn't taken a bath in a while, and he had this weird crazy look in his eyes that told me he was trouble. I just had a feeling, and I desperately wanted to be wrong about it, so I yanked the kid away and berated him as we made our way toward the cashier. "What were you telling him anyway?" I asked. "Just that we were renting some movies, and that we were home alone," the kid said innocently. I don't know why that didn't make my alarm bells go off in my brain right away, but I guess I was too busy paying for the movies and dragging them out of the store. When we were walking back toward their house, it finally registered what he had told me. "Did that man ask if you were alone?" I asked. My heart was starting to beat a little faster, but I didn't want the kids to think I was worried. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw someone following us. "Yeah, he seemed friendly, asked a lot of questions about me," the younger boy responded. I picked up the pace and told them that we needed to hurry back to their house. I was positive now that we were being followed. I remember I looked back several times to see where the man was, but every time it felt like it was just barely out of sight. He was a master of stealth. Once inside the house, I slammed the door shut and chid the kid for being stupid. "Don't ever talk to strangers. That man could have done you some serious harm." I remember thinking I should punish them both by having them go to bed early, but I had no idea how right I would be about my warning of the stranger. I glanced out the window to see if I could spot him, and after calming down, I went ahead and let them pick a movie. I was also trying to convince myself my paranoia had just been my imagination. Less than 10 minutes later, as we were watching the Angels in the Outfield movie, I heard a knock at the door that made me realize maybe I hadn't been cautious enough. I went to the front and peeked through the blinds, curious to see that no one was outside. My heart was pounding now, as I thought I saw the man in the trench coat standing over near the bushes. I immediately told the boys to pull the blinds closed and then to turn the lights off. Next, I started to hear the stranger banging on the windows with what sounded like a stick. Was he just trying to frighten us? I remember wondering. If so, he was doing a stellar job, because I was terrified. "Turn off the TV for now. Let's get to the bedroom," I said. I remember that the Moores had a house phone up in their master suite, so I was calmly trying to herd the kids there as this wacko kept rattling against the outside of the house. The kids were getting scared now, especially the youngest, and he was starting to cry. "Be quiet, don't be scared," I told him as we ran up to the bedroom. I told them both to stay quiet as I reached for the phone, only to find that the line was disconnected. This was the moment when a real sense of panic and dread was starting to overwhelm me. It was just past 6:30, meaning that their parents would not be home for at least another 45 minutes, and now with the phone lines down, I was positive that this stranger was going to try to break in and do us harm. Still, I insisted that they remained quiet and calm. I told them both not to make a sound as I tried to listen to where the stranger was. The one thing about this whole experience I will never forget is that the stranger started to whistle for us, like he was looking for a dog. It was a loud, sharp, insistent whistle, and he kept saying, "Here, boy. Here, boy. Come here, boy." I swear, I have never been more scared in my life, and I ordered the boys to hide under the bed as footsteps came up the stairs. I was pretty sure we were about to die. It happened just like a horror movie too. He was standing outside the door because I could see the silhouette of his shadow peeking under the master bedroom door. Then the blockade of furniture started to rattle as I heard him fiddle with it. He shook it violently for a while, but to no success, and then for another long, indescribable, quiet moment, I thought maybe he had given up. The kids were trying their best to not squeal or scream or even cry, but it was so hard to be perfectly still. At any second I knew he was going to be back. Then, he slammed his body against the door, and it came slightly ajar. I remember jumping and holding the boys closer as he did it again, and then again, until at last, he could squeeze in past the wedge of furniture. All I could see were his shoes, leather boots that looked coated in mud. He walked slowly over to the bed and sat down, perhaps puzzling over where we were. He started to whistle again, and I had to cover the younger boy's mouth as he let a leash fall over the edge of the bed. Did he know we were here? What sort of weird fetish was this supposed to be? He walked around the room, moving to the closet first and checking for us there. Then we heard the sound of the garage door downstairs. I have never been so happy. Immediately, the stranger ran down and I heard shouts of alarm as Mr. Moore likely saw him escape. A few seconds later, Mrs. Moore was in the bedroom, frantically searching for us and calling out her child's names. I crawled out first and helped her youngest get out as she grabbed him and hugged him as tight as possible. Downstairs, Mr. Moore was trying the landline again to contact the cops, but it didn't work. Honestly, I thought the crazy guy was going to come back and do us more harm, so I didn't even want to step outside the house until my own parents came to pick me up. Mr. Moore said that I was very brave and paid me extra for helping keep his kids safe. My parents also told me I had acted swiftly and decisively, and it could have turned out a lot worse, but I didn't feel very proud. I had trouble sleeping for a week after. Any sound of a dog bark or a whistle would trigger the memory and make me want to curl up into a ball and hide. I can honestly only share it now after all these years, thanks to a bit of therapy. Sometimes I do think about what could have happened still though, had the parents not shown up early. Would he have harmed us or killed us? The cops never did catch whoever the guy was, so I guess we will never know. Except I know that at least I stopped babysitting for the upper class after that. This is probably the weirdest experience that's ever happened to me. One that is causing me a lot of trauma, and seriously made it difficult ever to date like a normal person ever again. Let me give you some background. I'm a 23-year-old woman. I live in a small town in rural Mississippi. I know everyone in the town, and they all know me. I never quite fit in with the small town scene. It wasn't I was against it or anything, but there just wasn't anyone I really clicked with. I had lots of friends, but I was still completely alone for as long as I can remember. A couple years ago, I started dating a guy who I met on Tinder. He was from a couple towns over, and wasn't the best looking guy in the world, but I don't let something like that stop me. I just wanted to know if he was nice and compatible with me. So, we went out on a couple of dates. It didn't go horribly. He was a perfect gentleman, and every time, he never pressured me into doing anything that I didn't feel comfortable with, which I really appreciate. So, after about 3 weeks of casual dates here and there, we made the decision that we really had something here. We both deleted our Tinder accounts together and started spending more time with each other. Honestly, I thought we had a real chance of having a lasting relationship. But as the time went by, I noticed that he was weird. And not the I watched conspiracy theory documentaries on Netflix kind of weird. I mean, I saw some real signs of various mental illnesses. Some of them include narcissistic personality disorder, bipolar disorder, with some extreme episodes of anxiety and depression. And he would eventually go insane over some of these things that stressed him out. So, one of the times he got into one of these episodes was when his uncle was going to visit. His parents asked him to sleep on the couch so his uncle could sleep in his bed, and he had a literal mental breakdown. I remember me and him texting back and forth, and he was asking me if it was a good idea to physically attack him or start a fight. A few more incidents like that, and I knew that I had to end this relationship. As much as I want to help people, I really don't want to sacrifice my own well-being for the sake of helping another person. It was probably 3 or 4 weeks into our relationship that I had made the decision. I asked him if he wanted to get some coffee, and he agreed. We broke up, and he actually took it rather well, which surprised me. I was expecting him to have some kind of breakdown, and while he did look sad, he didn't act inappropriately toward me at all. He had a solid frown on his face, then he walked away. I felt bad for doing it, but that was the decision that I made. Now we get into the weird part. In a couple of weeks that we've been dating, he had never been to my house and had no idea where I ever lived. That's going to be important to remember a little later on. We probably broke up around April or so. It seems to be somewhere in that time frame at least. So you can understand the terror that washed over me when I saw his car parked in my driveway almost a year later, on Valentine's Day. It had been so long since I had last seen him, I didn't even recognize his car at first. You can bet your rear end that I had my pistol with me, ready to protect myself, especially because my parents weren't home. Remember, I live in rural Mississippi. People don't just randomly show up at your house who live 2 towns away. That just doesn't happen like that. He got out of his car holding flowers. I couldn't believe myself. What the heck is wrong with this guy, I thought. I walked up to him, making sure to keep my pistol out of sight. I didn't want to alarm him, but I was ready to use it if he had bad intentions. His face looked strange. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. He also looks like he was really struggling and uncomfortable. I asked him what he was doing here, after we just kind of looked at each other for a minute. And then he said, "Will you be my Valentine?" The moment he began to speak, I knew he was intoxicated, and it honestly frightened me. I had heard too many horror stories that start out exactly this way. I pulled my gun out and pointed it at him. I screamed, "No! Go the hell home and never come back!" He genuinely seemed startled at the sight of the gun. Then he got going to his car and drove away. But as he ran, I noticed he dropped something metal in the hurry. It must have been just barely nudged into his pocket. After he'd sped off, I waited a few minutes just to make sure he was gone. Then, I walked over toward the object he dropped on the floor. I couldn't make it out at first because of the darkness. I picked it up and put it under my phone light. I was horrified. It was a pair of metal handcuffs. Just imagine how much he must have thought about me, that he waited all this time, building up the nerve to just randomly show up at my house with a pair of frickin' handcuffs, ready to do who knows what to me. It was honestly quite horrifying. I called the police and reported him for being a creep. They couldn't really do anything, seeing as he technically didn't commit a crime, so I made sure to tell my family and friends to watch out for him if they happen to see his vehicle around. I just imagine how different my life would be if I hadn't been armed that night. I was all alone, and my parents wouldn't have been home for hours. There was a solid chance of him kidnapping me and becoming someone you see on a true crime documentary. This has been a big reminder for me, and let it be a lesson for anyone listening right now. If you're defenseless and alone in the middle of nowhere, make sure that you have some way of protecting yourself, because I'm sure that I'm not the only girl in the world he's ever going to try this stunt on.